Так, Хаби. Кто душой?
Рядом с тобой душа всколыхнулась.
Вы слышите?
Что, даже шепоты мои слышны?
Я сейчас повторю. Он говорит, рядом с тобой душа всколыхнулась, говорит он.
So he told me that when I sit beside you, my soul trembles. My soul is trembling. So we are now going to have a speech of Lev Anninsky, the person who is a classic of our times and known to everyone from childhood. I couldn't call him a critic, literary critic, but he's a wonderful Russian writer, as the way how he wrote, what he wrote, actually helped raise many generations of Russians and Soviet people. So Nadari will not let me lie. He is known in Georgia. He loves Georgia. I cannot say much, only something very personal. In each biography, there is something very, very personal. And when we met with Yuri Senokosov, each of us had the biography and the background. And Lev Anninsky and his wife Alexandra, who is no more with us, actually very much helped this union with Yuri. So Lev is my personal friend and influential person, and to Yuri he was extremely influential because, unlike me, Yuri thinks more, and Lev definitely pays more attention. He influences him much. They interact, and I would like everybody to meet a wonderful Russian writer, Lev Anninsky, and he turned 80 on the 7th of April. When I told my daughter on the phone that Lev turned 80, no, it can't be. It's not true. And you will see by his speech, by his thoughts, that it's not true. So that's how I open this session. Well, I wouldn't dare to open my mouth after this wonderful description, unless I knew all of you for many years, and Yuri, when it all started. I was, you know who I was when when I escaped literature. I chickened out because at that moment I signed a letter to protect Andrei Sinyavsky, and I had to do something with that dangerous signing. And I escaped to philosophy, and in philosophy I was employed by the Institute of Philosophy, and with those powerful, mighty minds and philosophers, and Senokosov, whom immediately I discovered to have many things in common. We found a common language, we spoke common language, and then we had many wonderful times when he announced that he could give me text of Alexander Meny, the priest, and I got them. I started reading, and my perception, and Meny reads you. So there were some texts, that we turned out to be familiar with each other, and with the divine providence and the Senokosov. And I met Alexander Meny. I wondered if him being a priest and me being an atheist will stop us from. No, it did not stop us from having relations, because something came into my mind And when people ask me when I brought up according to our first intellectual traditions, managed to be an atheist and managed to believe in God. This is a very intimate question. It doesn't depend on my church going, but then I found this definition that I was a Russian, an Orthodox atheist. And when I was talking to a wonderful person who interviewed me, and I told him so, and he answered, "So even by your looks, you are an Orthodox, this little beard, and let me baptize you." I said, "No, you cannot do it this simply. I cannot be baptized under a command of someone." That's enough that I was brought up as an atheist, though I could be baptized in my childhood. But those people who could baptize me were killed in those civil wars, and all those grandmothers and grandfathers, I had none. And my father baptized me into the communist belief. I do not change, and I remain a person of these people, land, culture, and nothing is going to kick me out of the track that I had chosen once. And let me tell you why I feel warm with your presence. So I looked at the company. These are my people, my audience from different cities, republics. I stay in touch all my life with such people. And teaching in the universities, I was lucky to teach in 2 universities. I observe changes among the youth. We can have a separate discussion. I believe we lost a couple of generations with the Soviet Union and Marxism and all those couple of generations that we lose. But new generation comes and they ask, what the hell was that? And so it happens on TV. There was a series of my shows, but then there was a generation of revolution from Bloc to Yesenin. Then there was a series of TV talk shows, portraits of great Russian poets, Soviet poets, and classics from Bagritsky to Martynov. And when after this series of TV shows of mine, a TV spectator who wrote verses, we saw this series about the Russian poets. It turned out to be so interesting. What do you mean turned out? What do you mean turned out? We were sure that there was nothing interesting, just Stalin's dictatorship. Who told you that there was nothing of interest? Well, we were told. My teachers told me. I say, where have you been taught? In literature, Institute of Literature. Very talented guy. He was proud to. And then I realized that we don't have to be shy of the names, because there will be many upturns in the minds of grandchildren. But then when asked what was there, I lecture about the history of Soviet literature and poetry. And being Soviet, it was not futile, it was not empty. As this poetry of Tsarist Russia did not cease to be interesting. And before this Tsarism, there was something else. And it's an endless process. There has always been something interesting in life is suffering. You need to suffer, but you need to understand why was the reason. And Russians suffered a lot. And then topic setting is the Russian world. What before? Was it Russian or not? So why, at all levels, we call out this kind of bursting and this topic that is so hot? At any level you take, it keeps refreshing and renewing. And if we take Russia, that inherited everything that had been accumulated in the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union inherited actually the things, the treasures of the Tsarism and before pre-Peter's time, sometimes painful, bloody, and violent, and full of complementarity. So the process, and this process has been ongoing for centuries, not because someone come to agreement. People. Even Stalin and Hitler tried to find a consensus. People always try to coordinate their efforts. And sometimes there's powerful, mysterious, and unpredictable process where peoples and nations in history somehow try the ways to survive together, elbowing each other, helping each other, pushing, and then, hey, we're brothers, why such hatred? We are one people. I have probably an answer. This is just an attempt to explain why these so-called Westerners, Western Ukrainians, this authority, this, that authority. Great, good. My mom is from Ukraine. But I couldn't comprehend how come those young people with rods, why are they running around shouting? Who brought them up that way? I was brought up at school to hate Americans and failed, I don't hate them. Why? Even the Hungarians, we are not envious or jealous because of the history. And we don't even have this animosity to Germans, and suddenly we see it in Ukraine. So we are brothers, cousins or whatever you call it. But there is some process in history that's beyond us and absolutely absurd, and then it will just explode with the hatred of those young people. You can handle hatred, but handling a historical process cannot be helped. Well, every time you need to address specific tasks, otherwise no one can survive. And we shall be talking to Americans to try to find consensus, Europeans, then we shall turn a little bit to the east. We'll talk to China, to Japan, whoever, because this is the volcanic eruption, horrible by its permanent boiling process. The humanity who manages to survive, and how the planet emerged and the humanity, and we are flying somewhere, and we expect what's going to happen, and we are trying to find a consensus on little planet. This is an endless topic, and at all levels, the Russian world is not by chance at the level of international relations, geopolicies. Of course, we are going through some changes, a transition period, not us, but the whole mankind. We are at a stage of change of not just periods, but eras, ages. Where this history taking us? Probably someone can predict. I cannot. But this or that way, anyway, we are creating a new system of geopolitical energies, and they need to look for their own space. Each nation, each people will try to understand who they are, where are they going. Speaking about the Russians, are we going to the west? Are we approaching the east? Who are we going to join? And north and south, or east or west? Are they going to influence us? North, hardly, because though Khrushchevsky could not imagine Russia without the northern tribes. When Russians appeared, they called these are Slavic, Finnish, and Turk people, so all together. And why Russian world? Why not Turkish or Turk world? Why not Finnish? Because each nation, each people should decide in this conglomerate, in this mosaic, what's his place and what they have to do with their past. And this is a question of questions. And how those nations and they're plentiful and unpredictable. How they're going to turn and direct their energy? It's important to remember their language, traditions, name. You cannot just play with it, handle it roughly, because this is the only salvation in this permanent and convoluted flow of history. And we are saying that this Russian world definition becomes a shelter for us, or sometimes risky but unavoidable, because around Russia there is some new conglomerate, some new combination of people who consent to become what? Russians. Russian-speaking, to join, merge into the system of all Russian gravitation, but still remain each in their ethnic uniqueness. So I will be talking about it later. We are Russian indeed, and Russians want to remain Russians. Ask any Prokhanov or any other patriot, they say, no, we need to remember we're Russians. Russians are nations, and I say Russians are a super nation. And as a nation, they remember their roots and with the origin of the word Rus. But we are a super nation because around us there are so many hundreds of ethnic people who have different sources and origins. And in this situation, I suggest three options. I will reply three groups of questions. First, in this new combination of very dissimilar nations within the Russian Federation, so-called, or Russian Empire, as it used to be called, in this space where there are no natural boundaries. Well, take the UK, it's clear. There's water around. You could do parliamentarism, whatever you wish, but building empire on water, and the British built the empire with waters, and how can we build it? No boundaries until the Urals, even there is no mountain, and all rivers flow from top to bottom, from south to the north, and it's unclear how you just divide this territory. It's huge, it's immense, and this immense, vast, spatial territory, how did it start? Remember those Russian tales? Just a clear field. Clean and clear mean good. And who would gallop, a mighty man, a warrior with his shield and a spike, and to meet another horse-mounted strong guy? And are they going to come to agreement? No, they hit each other. One of them or another fall to the ground from the horse, and then they try to understand why they should actually collapse, as there are no roads, but just a field, you know. You can meet anyone and hit anyone, and then each time, why are you attacking me, Isha? Why you? What are you doing here? What are you doing here? I live here. We all live here. So why? And there are no borders. That's why this this approximation. So people are approaching each other. So you need to organize the space. And there is no yet the notion of Russian world. But in Chinese, it sounds like yam. What is yam? Yam is a postal station. Clear a field, a steppe. So you need to lay a path so that you didn't just gallop across the field, but you need to get a path from one point to another. And there was horse-driven postal services. Who brought those yams through to this vast space? We know who. Don't tell me Tatars. They were rather Mongols, guns, as Lev Gumilev. And what's the word Tatars? Where does it come from? For instance, if in a tent, a Mongol, some wonderful, nice Timuchin from China is sitting and arranging, orchestrating all this, he's not the one to go and attack, to arrange an offense on a city. And then in front of him, those who were following this battle feeling, the Polovtsi, Pechenegi, whoever, and then they storm a castle. And the people who are protecting the castle do not understand their language. They just listen, tar, 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 those Tartars. Yeah, because that's the way they talk, nothing else. No matter who they are, and then they lay the paths, and then the state, and as a rule, they call itself a universe. And the Tsar is then Napoleon will come. He's another. He'll bring a code and for lands, and he's another owner of the universe. And they are possessed by the global idea. And the Russians, more than anyone, turned out to be possessed by the idea of the global world revolution, brotherhood, communism, unity, whatever. But it should be global, because no boundaries still. No borders, no boundary. And then we have what we call a Russian world, the way it started, the way it evolved, according to Kluchevsky, the historian, 3 ethnic groups. It doesn't write. He speaks, and someone writes for him. The Slavic, northern, like Finnish people, and Turks. And out of those 3 ethnic groups, very dissimilar, very different, diverse. The power of things, historical perspective, impossibility to get away from each other. No matter where you go, you will be caught, you will be chased. So somehow something in common emerges, and this commonality becomes the Russian ethnic community. That's according to Kluchevsky. And now the Slavic scholars say, no, look for solid roots. Slavic were only, when they went to forage around Byzantium, they were using those boats. But in those tents, again, the people from the east were sitting. And those who dwell on the shores of the rivers that carried people to battle Byzantium. So Slavic people, and so from the north, people from Finnish and Turks, let's call them Turks. So the Russian nation, Turkic, and I was asking, what did we get in the Russian character from which people? So the Russian nature, Russian character, has been described the way we tolerate ourselves and the way we are, and the Russian personality. From Turkic people, we have instinct of the state.
There was no statehood before the Turkic peoples on that territory. The Turkic peoples introduced the idea of a grand state, and the Russians inherited it after 100 years of combat, up until the standoff on the river Ugra, which marked the end of the Tatar rule, because Tohtamish, the Khan, was indeed the head of this horde, and when of course, when Mamai, the last Khan, came to try and subjugate the Rus, then that ended up with the defeat of the horde at the Kulikov battlefield. So, if we have inherited the idea of statehood from the Tatars, we have Sergei by the name Tohtamishev now. It's all right, isn't it? So, granted that we have inherited, according to this hypothesis, state institutions from the Turkic peoples and the Mongol Tatars, then we have inherited the sense of mysteriousness from the northern peoples, according to that very concept. And if you take Pushkin's heroines, his ladies who harbor within themselves that lyrical, mysterious facet of the Russian character, this is what, according to Kluchevsky, came from the northern peoples. Now, what about the Slavs? What about the Slavic peoples who were following the rivers from the Balkans and were not particularly militant? They did not war against the northern peoples, but they came to coalesce and to settle and inhabit these woody plains and the banks of the rivers. What did the Slavs introduce into this Russian mentality? It is the emotional nature, the spark, and the Slavs who have become the Russians immediately come to render and to embark onto the new ventures with a great emotional energy. So, according to a great Russian historian Kluchevsky, these are the three sources. Then, of course, through the mixture with the Caucasian peoples, the peoples of the North Caucasus, the Jews, the Poles, the Baltic peoples, the actual nation was cemented. So we're talking about this wide Russian world encompassing both the Great Rus or the Great Russia, Belarus or the White Russia, Ukraine, the Ukraine, and indeed it is in many ways a very hard legacy. This is the world that we have inherited, and that is why the notion and the concept of the Russian world is constantly referred to in the public discourse. I would like to talk about this Russian world, this phenomenon, from three viewpoints. First of all, if there is any truth, if we can, is there any truth or historical truth that might explain the behavior of peoples and groups of peoples, the continents, that could explain the causes of the world wars? Where does this come from? Where does this is there any truth behind that? There is truth, but nobody will know it. It will still be in the umbra of some mystical beginnings. But does every people or every nation seem to have its own truth? And when two great peoples come to combat each other at Stalingrad, the Russians and the Germans, both peoples having introduced the great treasures into the world culture. What do we see? What is this? We have our truth. The Magyars have their truth. The Romanians have their truth. And every nation, every people has his truth or her truth. This is the history. Now, where is the universal truth? The verity and the truth as the two words which are clearly distinguished in Russian language. Verity is still in the quite in the domain of the mystical. and each people obeys this course of events which might lead to the truth, but in fact doesn't. Lev Tolstoy has this system of perceptions in his God-seeking Christological works, of which a good part are totally outdated or obsolete. But there are some pages which have been written by a truly great thinker that he was. He says, intellect, our mind is not in a position to encompass everything. The reason the mind, human mind, may take us up to new stages of civilization. He says that what is this? Is this the meaning of life? No. This is what the mind or the reason may teach us. And we can, and then he goes on to say that yes, we have to engineer water closets better and better. But what is the meaning in our engineering efforts? To the question of meaning, it is not our mind that answers. It is some supreme instance that addresses these matters of meaning and intimate sense of things. But will the supreme force answer these questions? And Tolstoy gives a startling answer to this question. He says, this force, this supreme force, says that there is meaning. This is the most important thing that the supreme authority tells us. There is meaning. What is the meaning, we ask? And to answer the question about what meaning, then you have to go and live your life and take everything that you have been destined to go through on this earth, and then you might understand what meaning might have been in your life. What was the meaning behind World War I or World War II? There were truth. There were competing truth, but there were no meaning. There are no terminal answers to these questions, and I still believe that the question about the two world wars and this damned century, the 20th century, the century of damnation, whereas in the 19th century people thought that 20th century would become the culmination of our hopes. Both the Germans and the Russians hoped for socialism to solve our ills, national socialism in Germany and international socialism as we saw it in the Soviet Union. But I can't understand why is it that the 20th century came to become the very sad end of the great hopes of the 19th century. And this probably I will leave this world without being able to answer this question, including the death of my father. And I met Lev Nikolaevich Gumilev several times, and of course I have read him. It was very difficult to read his works, and I had to write a special order to get his books and his works, which were not published at the time. The works of Lev Gumilev made a profound influence on me, and Lev Gumilev only, I think, in England, some of his works were published in translation, but I was able to And I was working at the time at the Friendship of Peoples magazine, a literary journal. So, when editor-in-chief read his works, he understood that this is a very novel approach to the history of the Tatar horde. This history of clean waters and how the Rus were indeed interacting with the Turkic peoples was extremely very, very interesting. And I met Lev Gumilyov. We spoke. We finally published an article which was called "The Praise of Cleo," and Lev Gumilyov gave me a copy of this article in the 1970s. The censorship was still very, very strict, and he was given a copy of this by the physicists who could copy these on their photocopy machines. And Lev Nikolaevich was of course shocked that he was even paid for the article he wrote, and indeed I had the intellectual luxury of talking some of these things over with Lev Gumilyov. Danilevsky quotes some dates, Kluchevsky quotes other dates, Lev Gumilyov quotes yet other dates, and we are at a position when we're at the summit of this civilization. And I remember in Gorbachev's times, when the monument to Ernst Thälmann was erected at the Sokol metro station, airport metro station. So. Now there are, of course, different restaurants and supermarkets around that monument, and it was in the Gorbachev years. And I told Lev Gumilyov, think about this. How I still don't know how did I dare to ask these questions. If Thälmann and not Hitler had won the elections, and the war would not have happened, and my father would have been alive. And he said, if Thälmann had won these elections, the Russian-German war had happened in the same period, in the same years, and with the same outcome. And I was trying to survive his answer, really, and I understood that he was 100% fatalist, and fatalism in many cases helps us. This is what I had to say about my perception of the 20th century: verity and truth. And each people, each nation has his or her truth, and the absolute truth or the verity is not to be attained. And this truth may become is unpredictable. This is indeed the first concept that I wanted to talk about today. Another issue I wanted to consider during this session is as follows. So on this huge Eurasian space, limited in the north by the frigid ocean, and in the south by the mountains of almost the mountains of Tibet, the eastern borders abut to the Caucasus, and in the west it is the European civilization who came to teach us. So I'm asking myself, how come that this general system of Russian world survive? For the consciousness of the universal destiny or cultural base to remain. So it is this very unique feeling that these ethnic communities, elements, have come together in these vast plains without the natural borders and coalesced into what was to become the Russian world. It is not because Lev Gumilov told me once, there were no Proto-Russians in the world, as there have never been Proto-English or Proto-French, and there have never been Proto-people. Of course, now we're talking about the Angles and the Saxons, but when we're talking about the specific times, we're not talking about Proto-people, but the only possible people at each historical period. On this path, on these vast plains, we see three possibilities. If some ethnic groups, ethnic elements come together and are included into some unified system. Let us take an Indian going to settle in London among the English or the British. There are some tensions within Britain itself, but they're all internal. But an Indian who comes to live in London immediately becomes British. So he or she has to go through the English language education for the schools. His children, however, may become terrorists, but at least still everybody has to, either through hatred or through love, has to understand that he or she is entering the existing British culture. It is everything is possible, and some of these migrants may not perceive or accept this British culture, but these exceptions are still vindicating the rule. So those who settle into the culture. So does this mean that everybody has to Russify? Those who Russify wanted to become Russians. There is another possibility. This was option number one. Option number two is when every immigrant, every person who has come to enter this system does not accept the laws, but is indeed entering this melting pot. This logic of melting pot has been tried in human history several times, and we have seen that in several countries and on several examples. The United States being probably the most conspicuous of these. It is not just about the melting gathering of people coming from Ireland and Africa, from Germany and South America. So this melting pot may be more or less successful, and of course there have been terrible tensions, the wars, racism, and this is a very dramatic story, very dramatic history. However, we can see that a major conglomerate of peoples or even empires follow the path of a melting pot. However, in doing so, they lose some national unicity or traditional culture. I remember being in New York City somebody was showing me this coat from Alaska. Well, of course, there are some traditional lifestyles, but still the melting pot is predominant in America. We have in Russia some features of this melting pot, which to me are quite are quite unpleasant. My life has been about the traditions of this world. Oh, by the way, talking of the melting pot, I have published an article in the Rodina newspaper. I have taken a novel by Mikhail Kuraev, a very interesting author. He's an interesting author. He has written about the mutiny of Kronstadt, who has tried to understand the story of this counter-revolutionary rebellion when the sailors could not find a new place, and when they were taken by the lorries into Kronstadt and they were suppressed and they're taken to be shot, to be executed. And they're calling from these lorries, from these vans, that they will be shot. And Kuraev was the first person to have taken this through his psyche. And now Kuraev has written his new novel, and he says that to avoid the melting pot development model, we have to contain and preserve the traditional customs of those peoples which inhabit Russia. And the plot of this novel is that the KGB wants to portray some of these northern peoples in Russia as a group of essentially enemies of the people, enemies of the Soviet Union. So to preserve these customs, to preserve these customs of the northern peoples is a terribly difficult task, because the reindeer herdsmen still cannot resist the advances of the civilization. And so, what is to be done then? How can these traditional customs? How can the customs be preserved? And here is the third possibility, which is what I call multi-wire cord, or a multi-wire cable, which is what I think has been the development venue of Russia over the past 2 or 3 centuries. This multi-wire cord has preserved each of the wires while being united in one cable. Does this to say that we are solving problems in this way? We don't know, because a multi-wire cord or cable may end up with a short circuit. Let us think about the Soviet Union. But the logic of things was such that each multi-wire cord always has this danger of short-circuiting, and we can see these sparks even today in Maidan, in the Ukraine, and one has to be prepared for every scenario. What does this mean? History may take any course, but we have to be prepared under any circumstances, however dramatic it is. We have to be prepared to preserve what binds us together, the sense of common values and the sense that the people who have come to live in this vast chunk of land have to continue and coexist peacefully. This is what I call multi-wire cord of the Russian multi-wire cable of the Russian world. And let us assume that this Russian culture has been created as the only history that we can now take. What does it offer? What does it offer to the world? Is it just the national values, international values? What kind of values does this world suggest or offer to the world? I have tried to find a literary basis for it, and I came to a conclusion, to an understanding about the literary basis. I will quote from my work about Svetlana Alexievich, and I think that her father is Belarusian and her mother is Ukrainian. She writes in Russian. Now, let me quote a little bit from my work, from this work of mine, from this collection of essays. Well, my article is called The Blinding Darkness of Svetlana Alexievich, and there is a lot of darkness in her concept, but this is blinding darkness. Something happened to us. Svetlana Alexievich was, by the way, proposed for big name awards, literary awards. So if she'd gotten a Nobel Prize, I think that would be only fair. Over the decades that have passed from her first novella, she has become one of the most hotly debated authors in Minsk and everywhere where her works are published. And her works, her literature is published in Novy Mir, and this is done without the readership. In her first novel, she wrote about the role of women in the war, and she shocked people not only about the graveyards of the Russians. But her second book, The Zinc Boys, which was translated into French and shocked the French public into understanding the tragedy of the war in Algeria. And indeed, the terrors somewhere in Rwanda are happening such terrors, and the Western book market is writing about such horrors of today that the horrors and the nightmares of the past may sound as almost unpredictable and unimaginable. However, 30 plus books of Svetlana Alexievich, published in over 20 languages over the past 30 years. This is what I call the Russian world in action, in reality. So it happens that people have not departed from the horrors of the 20th century if we're seeing horrors which are in no way inferior in Rwanda and elsewhere.
And so now this is their turn to suffer because we've been suffering for too long. And there's another substantive circumstance so that determined the success, literal success. Svetlana discovered a new type of psychological confession. It's not a concentration of the character, so which speaks from himself, but this is a direct speech, so which actually exists in the unpredictable speech without any intermediaries. So there is a tape recorder, and so in one corner, and so another smaller tape recorders at that time. So the corner, big, bulky tape recorder, and people are saying what they feel and what they think, so without any interference, any intermediaries. So sometimes breaking the line of talk, and sometimes losing the course of conversation, but unveiling such details and going into the closest and the deepest parts of one's soul that were always covered and were never in the limelight. And so sometimes people realize that they can't possibly accept what they say. And Svetlana Alexievich shows himself not only as a wonderful journalist and a great person with whom you enjoy speaking, but he's beginning to think and see such truth, such verity that never even dared to pronounce. So you need to learn how to question people, but at the same time you need to realize what you're looking for, what you want to understand, what you're after. And trying to understand this, so after the first novel, so there was the second novel, so she's watching, so then the black consequences of Chernobyl, and so the war of Afghanistan, and so we understand that the war has many faces, women faces, children's faces, so the war kills everyone and does not have mercy on anyone. So children and women and adults and others, so the zinc boys, so the Chernobyl prayer. And then eventually, so the fifth novel, so what it means and why it happened, why everything has happened to us, the Soviet epoch, the Stalin dictatorship, and all this cruelty and horrors, and it looks like we have gotten rid of it, but it's still there. So this is the final book, very difficult. So the confession of the grandfathers and great-grandfathers who fought the war, and who managed to survive somehow just in this horrible arms race with the West and the North America, and then the Gulag and the imprisoned and everything. So how they managed to survive, no one knows. And so then they say it's your fault, because why did you allow yourselves to be subjugated by other people? But it's very easy to discuss things now. But when a person is afraid to die. So that is why they subjugated themselves willingly to the horrible times of Stalin purges, and then the horrible World War II. So when millions of people died, so she's trying just to connect the previous epoch with the present day times, and then it turned out that the present is worse than the past. So we managed to survive. We managed to get out of this bottomless pit, and then the relatives of the veterans of World War II. So they're selling their own country. So they're humiliating their own country. They're stealing. They're killing, and they are the grandchildren of those who won the war. And so that's why we need to listen to the confessions of all those people who survived, who are young and old, and so the curses that are heaped upon each other by the totalitarian epoch, and by the people who survived, who are old enough, and the young guys. And that is why. So the truth is based on myths. And so the second hand, so the final novel second hand, so because something that previously enjoyed article that is sold again, and this is what we are now. So this is the cursed past which has become second hand, and they're trying just to resell it again to the young generation. And second hand, will I agree with this statement? No, I don't like this name because it's not from other people's hands as we could perceive it, but it's through the hands of those who dragged Russia through all the horrors and all the blood and all the violence that we have had in the last century. And so then there is the time to scatter the stones and to collect the stones, and we can't forget it. And there is nowhere to run. There is nowhere to hide. Everywhere is horrible. So everywhere they shoot. Everywhere they. So it's much. So they say it's much better to live now. But I hate living here now. So it's a certain life has become much better, but I'm kind of squeamishly disgusted with the way I live now. So that's why from the horrible times of Stalin times and the war times, so we got into the perestroika. Horrible times, and because they're not much better, because people at least were sacrificing themselves for the great cause, and now they are sacrificing themselves to buy themselves a new pair of jeans and a new car, and it's still second hand. So. But what kind of this previous experience of 70 years of Soviet power? So her answer, yes, I quote her saying, millions of people on a huge territory, so were taken away by a great dream of building a paradise on earth, communism. So the society lives along the lines of friendship and honor and integrity. The state that would be based on this free everything, free medical care, health care, so then the young will have career opportunities, and the old people will be respected, and the beautiful future, so then everyone will get what he wants. So everyone will get, as he was, this utopian ideas. So they were taken away, they were swept away. So by the best people, just who decided just to throw themselves head over heels into this new life and create this world that the rest of the world, the rest of the globe would only envy. And we would present this beautiful world to other people. But the horrible lesson of socialism, because they trust more to those who suffered under socialism than those who preach socialism afterwards. And because if they manage to build socialism on the sixth part of the earth. It means that we set an example that needed to be avoided. But at the same time, so there is a spiritual component in the human life, and there is the animal, horrible part. Dark rivers of the heart exist, and that is why. And so much depends on which way the a person's self will sway. So to the dark rivers of the heart, or the spiritual part. And we always want to look into the void, because we are urged to look into the void, and we want subconsciously to jump into the void, because socialism is not the cause but the effect. Because when you try to explain it now, so you understand that this is an ideological doctrine. So if you turn the socialism out, will you get a wonderful socialism? No, you will get the modern oligarchs, because all you have to do, if you turn socialism inside out, so then you will get oligarchy. And so we need to remember that socialism was born many years ago. So then it's much older, and it was not referred to socialism, but it was always present in the minds and hearts of the West. So Plato, Aristophanes. So then the ideal state. So when in the dreams, then we have Thomas Campanella. So when they thought that, so there will come the time when everyone will have everything all equal, no money, and so these utopias, socialism, so they date back to the to BC times, and then Marxism, Leninism, and so they eventually evolved into the present-day Leninism. And chronologically, when in the Tsarist Russia in Simbirsk, so then the future leader of proletariat was born. So actually captured the crumbling empire. At the same time, in Germany, the German teacher was born, and they not started to consolidate Germany, and Germany started to get stronger and stronger. So the same word for German, socialism, crowned. And so, although just it goes in different directions. In Europe, so that the cult of this white man's supremacy in Eurasia, in Russia, it's internationalism. So both Germans and the Russians decided to educate people to live in a modern society. So that was very important. And so both Russians and Germans wanted to do that. So then another thing that I was touched, I lived in Europe for a long period of time, and nowhere, so the art people and the people intellectuals, they never held discussions. So what's happening in the society, what needs to be done, especially in Germany, and so that the German society looks like ours. So they understood the nature of human beings. So you need to remember our sinful nature, because the monster, the huge monster, has been killed, but the little monsters that were begotten, they are everywhere now. Those little monsters from socialism, from Nazism, the greatest monster is that, but the small ones are everywhere, and then the Germans understand that. So we have been trying to improve a human being. So we thought that we could improve. Yes, so we wanted to add more good things to a human being, and the Germans wanted to remove all bad things from this. And now we understand that a human being cannot be changed, and so we need to be always apprehensive of the dark rivers of the hearts of human beings, and we need to realize that it's there. And so this foundation, Hitler, Goebbels, and Stalin and Lenin. So this dark foundation, so that gives forth the horrible monsters of the 20th century, and we need to realize that they're always there, and we need to be aware of them. We need to be aware of them. So this substance is oldest times. Because the mankind does not know why they have grown and became a nation on this plot of land. So they develop the land, so they use the water, they cut the woods, they just learn how to survive and live, and so they break out into a number of nations and peoples, and they're moving around looking for new space to live, so always waiting for a calamity, always waiting for death, always waiting for horrors, and that is why there is always this deep in the heart existing trouble, a concern of all nations that something bad might happen. So in all options of socialism, including our Marxist-Leninist socialism, where the peoples of Eurasian era, so that they were getting ready to fight, and so at the beginning, so they started to understand the something horrible coming in, and so now they started to blame so Americans, Germans, Russians, French, so nobility, the emperors, everyone was to blame. Yes, and so then the whites. Then the whites were in the way of the reds, and the reds were in the way of the whites, and so it was just all going non-stop like a horrible and killing people by the millions. So Russia, that was completely annihilated, trampled upon by the debacle of the World War I, and so the people did not know who to fight, and so they were trying just to find the enemy and kill him. That's why they started killing themselves. Maybe so we should have given our Russia to the Germans because they were not yet Nazis, and maybe we should have given ourselves to them, or we should have tried to save the country that shot his own emperor and his family. And so how could you possibly have saved a country that was in such dire strait? So Richard Pipes, a famous anti-Soviet. I'm quoting him, Richard Pipes. He is a wonderful anti-Soviet guy. So I read him. I was afraid I would be in prison for reading Richard Pipes, and that's now I quote him openly. It's wonderful. Richard Pipes was Pipes. So he is Polish. He's not Pipes. He is Pipish. He is not Pipes. Anyway. So he is our guy, and he has very interesting juxtaposition of the then Russian forces that claim to head Russia, so then the nation was ready to follow. So cadets, constitutional Democrats, no, they did not want to follow. They did not want to follow cadets, constitutional Democrats. So only two forces could lead the masses of the Russians, so with their leaders, either the Black Sotnias, the Black Hundreds with their orthodoxy, nationality, and their pogroms, with their socialism, and the Bolsheviks turned out to be cooler than the Black. And so the top guy said, yes, there is such a party, so said Lenin, and the socialism started to gain ground. So we are ready to fight to the death for this. But what is this? For the happy future? No, that's a myth. What are we going to die for? Because in reality there is war, death, or victory. But the myth is kind of anesthesia. It's a painkiller. That's a saving from. So for this, they were supposed to die, and the state wanted them to die. So then the idea of socialism. So when the war broke out, 1941, so national socialism against socialism in Russia, national socialism in Germany, and they fought to the bitter end, and so much blood was spilled, and then that is why. So the task was to take Russia out of the blinding darkness of socialism. And so then the next component is the soup made of an axe. Again, totalitarian dictatorship. So we always speak the word. So that's where Gulag, where the political prisoners are, collectivization, movement of the nations, wars, bloodshed, getting ready for wars, from Stalin to Brezhnev. So I had leaders who had been fighting all the time. My mother from the intelligence, before the war, she was crying, so when International was sung, and my mother survived the war, and she always remembered that the Russian soldier hung the red flag on the Reichstag in Germany. So we won such a great war. And the generation that did not see the war, is it a lost generation or it's not a lost generation? They did not experience the war, so there's no dictatorship, there's no socialism. But what is it that we have? And okay, the factories stopped making missiles and they stopped making refrigerators and vacuum cleaners. So what? So the great mission of Russia and toilet bowls. So buy women's clothing, nice. So for some reason, so jeans become the symbol of consumption. So how many lunches a day can you eat to satiate yourself? How many soldiers or the genetic memory will wake up eventually? So then, so why do we have just two? So for example, if people are starving, if people are dying of starvation, so which is on the fringes of your knowledge, it's on the fringes of your intellect, because you genetically remembered on the one hand, so we're afraid of losing all food, because remember the times when people were just dying of hunger. So have you ever eaten soup made of turtles? Have you ever made of elephants? Okay, let's do this and this and this. Are you happy now? I want just another soup made of something else. So what is the? So I want an apartment. I want a car. Or I want an expensive watch. I want expensive clothing. So why? So then everyone needs a Mercedes and a trip to Miami. So then to go hunting to Africa. What else? Where is the limit to your dreams of consumption? So this is the flip side of the coin. And then for many generations, something that was just a dream, but now it's all here, it's material. There were no tangerines, now there are tangerines. So there were no jeans, now there are jeans. So you can pay and get 200 pairs of jeans. So now our shops look like museums. And what about theaters and movies? So they look like modern shops as well. So this is the complete breakdown of art and beauty. And so money is freedom. Freedom is money. Where do you get the money? Okay, you can get as much money as possible, but you're still not satiated. You want more and more. So even if you have millions of dollars, you are still hungry. And so then what else? So you start looking for the Kalashnikov assault rifle. And so I was drafted at 18, so what kinds of arms and services would you like to serve? So be ready to protect your motherland. And so why? Who should I protect it on? So it means war that is always behind every person, so that is looming over every person, which is a dangerous beast. So readiness for violence, readiness to be violated, readiness to inflict violence. It's everywhere. It's hanging around. It's a horrible mist that is around us, and so that makes us not sleep at night. So then. I was selling toys when I was during the perestroika. So then once they were taken away all the toys, and then they gave me lots of still water. Then still water I exchanged for TV sets for casseroles. Do we need casseroles? Yeah, well, good, because I will need casseroles, because if I start hunting for elephants, then I will get meat, and the meat should be fried on casseroles. That's why we need casseroles. So this, if we'd known what you are. So then eventually axe is much more important than the owner of the axe, because the axe will always survive the owner of the axe. So then the personal guards of modern oligarchs, they are armed not only with axes but with tanks and assault rifles and grenade launchers. And it is why our soup, democratic soup, socialistic soup, a very exquisite soup made of elephants and turtles. But at the end of it, at the basis of it, the base point, the base denominator is the war that is looming all over us. And so that echoes what has been happening. So the butchers and the victims, how did it combine? How did it complement each other? So we're lucky. So our happiness that they would come in the dead of night and they would arrest someone would disappear, never come back, someone would be shot on trumped-up charges without investigation. But I remember so wonderful, so the bright sun, the blue sky, so friendly relations, the parades, so athletes parading down the Red Square, everything was fine. And Stalin and Lenin standing on the mausoleum. And so how just you can see through the beautiful lilacs and fragrant smell, how you can see the butchers and the victims. It's not the nation, because the nation was in prison, and the nation was the butcher, and the nation was the priest, and the nation was the victim. The nation was everything. It's the same people, and it's coherently, closely knit nation that is responsible for what hasn't got, because the butchers become victims, the victims become butchers. And that's how it worked out for many decades. So if you want to go to secret police, if you don't want to go to secret police, then the secret police arrests you. So there is only two ways for the same people. And who were they afraid more? So they were afraid more than Germans, more than the Nazis. So then the generals, Russian generals, were afraid of the secret police. And so why a person put against the wall who was about to be shot was saying, "Long life Stalin." So Stalin answered that question. I do not decide it, but the party decides what to do, what's expedient. Do you think that I'm Stalin? No, I'm not Stalin. Stalin is that guy, and he pointed at the portrait of Stalin, and this is the best. Because I'm not Stalin, Stalin was saying, but I am that portrait. I am the epitome, I'm the personification of what? So because a specific person can be dragged out of this pit only after World War II was over, but other people framed those bastards and hung them on the wall. And then trumped up charges when people just were whistling on each other. So that's half of the nation was reading, and half of the nation was writing. They were telling on each other, and then one was telling on each other, another one was telling. So people would base. So brother was telling. So then they fought just over just a small room in your apartment. So would you like just to see your criminal record? She opens up. So that's I know this signature. So that's my neighbor, and my neighbor in the communal apartment. So she told on me, and I was arrested, and she moved into my room. So we spent together, we had vodka together, we ate together, we sang together, we loved each other, and then all of a sudden just she wrote this letter to the secret police. I was arrested. So half of the nation was writing to the secret police, and another half was doing that. And this is horrible, because all these Uncle Yurin, Auntie Vanya and Anya, so they know that if they have not yet been told on, so they will be told on, because this axe is hanging over their heads. This sword of Damocles is hanging over all our heads, and we know that it might fall any minute, and our heads will roll. And so then the first unscared generation, because there is no war, so the generation that have not experienced war, have not experienced trumped-up charges, have not experienced so the massacre. Yes, and then they say that. So then the Russians do not understand freedom. So they always need a Cossack and a whip. Only then the Russians will be able to act properly. Yes, or the icon and the mace. Mace and the icon. Mace and the icon. This is what makes a Russian, or a war and prison are the most important Russian words. So you stole, then you had some vodka, and then you were apprehended and put into jail again. And this is the vicious circle, and we cannot break this horrible circle. And we always just want the golden fish to grant all our wishes. I don't want to work. I don't want to work hard. Yes, I want just to sit, do nothing, and I want this miraculous golden fish to grant all my wishes. And because we're lazy and cruel. And suddenly they're learning to live in this absurd life, in this distorted mirror life. And from Genghis Khan, so that's a good starting point, good benchmark, because Genghis Khan spoiled our genetic pool, because they always let's blame Genghis Khan for our inability to work, for us telling on each other, just for us being cruel, for us listening only to the whip and the mace, and so we're always looking for someone else to blame, and so then but the Genghis Khan tried to impose some order and law, and Russia didn't work out that way, and so we want to start from the beginning. Every time we start from scratch, and every time we make the same mistake. Mr. Oblomov just is lying on his couch and doing nothing and complaining about life. So then the school curriculum got deep into our souls, and Nikolai Ostrovsky, famous Russian playwright, and so then other and Tolstoy and Turgenev and all of them were writing about the uniqueness of the Russian soul, especially crazy. And this goes hand in hand as how steel is tempered. So then the love for the future makes you determined. So Russian should have an idea that would make your hair stand on end, and then they will go for it. So you always have this crazy burning in the eyes and unattainable goal, and then the Russians would be happy to go for it because they want to prove to the rest of the world, and the more bloody, the more horrible. So this idea is, the better, the more attractive it is for the Russians. So so this either it's the prison R&D or mass shootings. So in the West, the old capitalism, and now we have young capitalism, so Byzantine type of capitalism, wild Byzantine type of capitalism, Wild West capitalism, so that but it's not only so what we sowed and how we watered, but what the earth is, because the earth is something that is it fertile ground or not fertile ground, but for the seeds and for the water. So the Russian earth is always fertile for cruelty and for slavery, because we do not change. So okay, we can have another uprising, stupid, and then it will be squashed, and then there will be another uprising. It will be put down with great degree of cruelty as well, and there will be nothing. We'll never learn. We always go back to square one, and nothing changes. It's stable, and it doesn't change. An unpredictable world. You always risk that you will lose your beloved ones, that you will risk losing your apartment, you lose the roof over your head, you lose your ability to feed your family, and you never know what might happen tomorrow. That is why. But if you know that that you will be deceived, but if you are ready to be deceived, you will deceive them as well. So then the flagrant flouting of basic human values and so the morality is not existent. So Russian people are afraid to be rich because they know that someone will come and take it. Because they're not afraid to be they're afraid to be rich, but they don't want others to be rich because they're envious of others becoming rich. So what do you have in your pocket? In my pocket, I defy everyone. So there is a knife or an axe in my pocket. But then the last shirt, so our Russian can give away. Why he is so magnanimous? Because he knows that he will steal much more, and that is why he is ready to give away. And so the saints, are there saints in Russia? Oh yeah, there are lots of saints in Russia. So what do we have deep in our soul? We have only soul and nothing else. That's why we are God-chosen people. That's what we say. But the beauty around us and the tears well up, and the Russian sadness, the Russian despondency, which is so famous among the Russians. So the Russians are not kind, they're sentimental, because the kind people should make everyone happy, but the sentimental people, if you can see this absence of logic, absence of sequence, absence of movement, what do you have? Pity, that's what we have. Sentimentality, that's what we have. We listen, we say yes, we pity everyone, the whites and the reds, and we hate them all. So I can finish up here. Okay, let's start the discussion right now then. Okay, let's discuss it. Let's discuss it. I think that so we can certainly open up the discussion, and that's what we'll do. We still have 25 minutes to discuss. So if your depression is getting stronger, I can give you the first to speak. So would you like to speak? So your depression, has I generated depression? Because he was saying that I'd been in depression since morning, and so would you like just to lighten the mood and be the first to ask a question? Okay, colleagues, I think that Lena is asking me to come up with my opinion. I don't want to do that. So first, I want just to give you a chance to ask questions, and I so that Alexei Rykov wants to start. Please, Alexei. He left. Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Your floor is yours. Thank you. So you mentioned Germany. I would like to remind that in the Article number 1 of the Constitution of Germany, it says that that the main is the inviolability and honor of a human being. That's the Article 1 of the Constitution. And it doesn't say anything about the state, about the people, about the ideology. And Article 2 of the Constitution says that any German can resist those who try to violate the wording of Article 1. So anyone can resist and fight for the integrity and honor. So what about the Russian world? Is that another construction? And so that can gobble up human being, integrity, human rights, aspirations, and everything. So why do we need to discuss it? This Russian world, so which you described as like black paint, because we've been talking about this Russian world, penitent dogma over the last 15 years. What is it at the end of the day? Is it just an attempt to fill in the void? This Russian ideology, for example. So, what is it? What's your position? What you stand? Because your pronouncements about
socialism and all those. all this humiliation of a person. I agree. So what do you think the Russian world, what role should it play? Yes, it's not the ideology that matters. The history works in mysterious and horrible, horrendous ways. Sometimes we can mitigate something, guess something. So at the level of conscientiousness and reason, but we cannot understand. We are going with the flow, and we don't know where the flow is going. The dignity is protected every time in new conditions, and you can never say what's better. A German will say fight, and if Russians say everyone fights, so there will be a Russian uprising, always senseless and ruthless. Could you please explain to me what to do in this situation? So this rebellion, I will never go away from this country. I am created by this country. I am just getting ready, just in case. And in each situation that I find myself, I try to find a way of salvation in the form of dignity. And as you're convinced, they take the cases when there is no answer, yes or no, and where people blow a whistle of each other, then they go to jail, then they do their term, and they get free, and then if you are still alive, go and live. And where is your dignity? And Tolstoy says, when your life is over, you understand what was the sense of it. And what should we do? Order elephant meat or change the routes of oil and gas transportation? What should we do? Reason. In mid and close term, what are we doing in terms of what are the authorities doing? The sense of life, the reason for life. You have to search in the depths of your souls and among the great writers and thinkers. And we always had enough of them. There were not many. We are very talented. We Russians, we have so many smart people, but so few people who know how to do things. Lenin was saying something, and Gorky was writing down. He didn't write it down, and in his first publication about Lenin, he published and said, and this sentence was actually deleted, and I can tell you the follow-up of this. We have talented people, but not very many smart people. Because a smart person is either a Jew or a practitioner. So, and in Perestroika started printing and printing over this piece. So we Russians are very surprisingly talented people. What is a talent? Is when a person is ready to answer the unexpected moves of the fate and nature. All the rest is skills, experience, reason, rationale. But if you mix it with talent, then you can try to live within this unpredictability. How do you protect your dignity when I'm sitting here and reading God knows what? I'm telling you what I feel. And you feel something in return. You may tell me I'm wrong, or you may think first and say something else. But this or that way we exchange. And we exchange our feeling of dignity right now. Second try. Alexei, St. Petersburg, 2010. Honestly, please don't get offended. I heard this detailed version of cultural. This is not his number. This is the alumni year. So please speak clearly. I had a feeling when I was listening to you that I was listening to the detailed concept of a cultural policy signed by the Ministry of Culture. We are not Europe, we are not Asia, Russian world. I do not believe in this Russian world. I do not believe in those people who have souls, kill, imprisoned, but then they think about something high and divine and read Goncharov and Tolstoy and then go and kill. If they read, we would probably live in a different country. Yes. I have a question. The Russian world, if it exists for you, what is the attractiveness? What is the catch and sustainability in modern conditions that keep changing? Because Chekhov, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, I am sorry, that doesn't, matter so much. They are not so sexy anymore, because you have not tried to make a cooker out of a washing machine. So jeans, elephant meat. But if I believe in the Russian language, so what you were saying, probably the Russian language space does exist, but it's shrinking. And when you speak from this high elevated position, say we want such a war, we keep forgetting that we were allies in a coalition. Yes, Russian Empire is our space, but understanding, and other people are different, and understanding them and finding, like, what do you think? How do you think the Russian world is attractive? How can it attract and lure people? Attractiveness of the Russian world is not a subject for discussion. But for me, is one thing. Can you live among other nations? No, I cannot. It means I do not fit. And any person who can survive among others either changes the culture, tradition. Okay, if you can, go ahead. God bless you. I cannot. I am not looking for some special attractive trait. It's just fate. If fate is horrible, I better share this fate than teaching others how to get rid. You cannot get rid of your fate. You don't believe it? You will find something. I believe in your generation because you have no way out. This is it. We suspected that St. Petersburg is not the Russian world. You have just proven it. This is St. Petersburg. It's also Russian, but it's with a St. Petersburg taste, you know. When I first visited St. P in 1954, I was shocked after Moscow roughness and impoliteness. I was a student, 1954, and I saw that you could queue without being rude to each other. This is a special St. Petersburg. Don't touch it. I don't know. I'm afraid it has changed. It's wrong. I have just been there. No more St. Petersburg. Yaroslavl, please. Enough of St. P. New. Ilya, Yaroslavl, 2012. As for this multi-wired gate, I have humanitarian education, but I understand, so that to avoid a short circuit, then we need switches, and I hope that the last switch has not yet burned, and there is still a chance. And I wanted to ask your opinion once we consider the Russian world, Christianity, Orthodoxy, and penitence is the main thing. Why is it so difficult to ask for forgiveness from Poland, from Chechen people, and repent? Now we are talking about the Crimean Tatars, that they are going to be rehabilitated. Why Russian people who were also subject to atrocities, genocide, you cannot even call it otherwise, and it doesn't happen? You know, I didn't hear that. You need to repent to Russians. All people should be ready to ask for forgiveness for something they did and never did, because you never know if you have done something horrible without even knowledge, because life is unpredictable. So the penitence should be in every mind, every person. Doesn't matter Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, Christianity you're in Islam or in the West, in the East, in Judaism. People also somehow probably this word is purely Christian, but without it you cannot do it. If you did something wrong to others, they will do it to kind of divine retribution. So repent is what, not a question, it was a suggestion. Yeah, I'm happy I at least caused something that you could say. Habib Magomedov, Dagestan, 2005. Where were you? Russia, 19th century. We don't know where we are heading. Oblomov, Goncharov. What is higher, reason or emotion? In 2014, we are trying to understand with a person who is definitely prominent, very clever, educated. The Russian language is more emotional, I would say. Existential, yeah. Could we try the word civilization, Russian civilization, not the world? Because world, it's nice when you die, accompanied by the whole world, so a feast and the world. So is there an actual topic of Russian civilization? As one of the people in the Caucasus, what can I get from the Russian civilization? I'm a product of a Soviet civilization, and I'm living in the age of changes, just like all the people here. What will the Russian civilization offer now? What's the menu for people like us, who were brought up with Russian literature and some principles and values of the Russian civilization? What is the Russian cuisine for me? Yeah. As for the civilization, I explained, in detail, saying that we need to make toilets properly. If Germans make toilet the bowls better, learn from them. And sitting on that bowl, then you think, what's the sense of it? Culture is sense, culture is the heart of the matter. I don't understand even, I don't try to understand what Russian culture has to give to me. I think what I have to give to the Russian culture. This is what my feeling, this is what my sentiment. If the Russian culture suffers, I suffer. What can I get from it? Toilet bowls. But then if you act, then you understand the reason, the divine whatever behind it. And if you read Russian books and then expect what else it can give you, probably you didn't read, because there was so much suffering. And if Chernyshevsky was teaching us to appeal to Russia, to the axe, there's no need even to appeal. They're always ready. So don't be afraid of dirt. If the dirt is real, is life. Are we afraid of dirt? We are washing our toilet bowls and keep asking, what can it give us? Nothing, except belonging to the great culture that is inseparable from great suffering. That's all I can tell you. Thank you, Evgeny from Kirov, 2010. You have already answered one of my questions regarding the fate of Russian person that's inseparable from the motherland. You said you will never leave. You said you would never leave. And I wanted to ask you to elucidate, to this metaphor. Everybody understands this melting pot, that you get the components and then get something whole, but the metaphor of multi-wired cables. We understand we have different wires, red, what's going through those wires? What's the connection? Where are the mains in the wall? Where does it lead? What is going to power? So good insulators are required. Well, if we consider this as a metaphor, this is an idiom, not an exact scientific definition. Definitely you need insulation. How am I going to insulate when we all live together? If you don't insulate, St. Petersburg from Voronezh cannot insulate, no Chaldon from the west. No insulation, and there is no need to. You need to learn to be different and to have common destiny, This is the mystery of the Russian history. We all go together, each of us, but we are different. Not just stick or carrots, but you will have bruises and wounds, but we understand. What? Tell me, are the French the same? You take the one from the northern France and the south, or Italians who want to separate into autonomy because they wear different boots, high boots or low boots. They are different, Italians, But Russians, they all have it. But the Russians made it into a national disaster or national salvation. At this very moment, we are still saving ourselves. But behind our backs, we have a century of evil, to death, death toll, horrible. What are you going to tell me? Clean the bowls? Yes, we are trying to, but sometimes we are quite tired and so there is no stamina. But as for the reason behind it, yes, there is some. As soon as we have this Russian land, Russian space, the question, who are you? Why are you joining together? What do you want to build? What do you want to build? The kingdom of God, and then global kingdom of fairness, of justice. And then what did you want to build? Oh, we want to eat some elephant meat. We want consumption. We are still hungry. We haven't been saturated over the 1,000 years. But when we are not hungry anymore, then we shall ask ourselves the question, why do you exist? What's the reason? As a Russian, I know that there is no happiness, no nations that just has a happy destiny, just a destiny, and the destiny is your sense. Maybe the last question, briefly. St. Petersburg again. So, God save me from trying to argue with you. Probably I misunderstood something. I dare not. I hear the main takeaway. We have no way. We have destiny. And I believe this is mutually exceptional things, mutually excluding. Probably if we have no way, probably we should learn seek one or borrow one. That's great. So my last question, last answer, and it's going to be a good one. In my university, I had to do Soviet literature and write my papers on Gorky, and I was going to. But Hungarians rebelled in 1956, and we were all suddenly found ourselves unemployed. And I started thinking, what should I do next? And the Russian person always has something to do. I was a linguistic guy, so I had to choose between Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. That's the way. And I couldn't really decide between Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. Both are necessary. Both were kind of asking questions without answers. And I thought, no, I will switch to the word way. Tolstoy. What is Tolstoy? He explained, this is something above us, the orifice that when we need to understand. This is abyss. This is and where is Dostoevsky? Another abyss, but under us. You go down, you meet Dostoevsky. You go up, you meet Tolstoy. And when you go down, and you see the abyss and the nightmares that you have to overcome. This is the lower abyss. And what about the Russian culture. It's definitely abyss, upper or lower, underground or over this in heaven. But what's in between? Is there nothing, no way between those two types of abyss? And then I just say yes. Just learn reading. Read Leskov. This track, this path between those two gaps. And Leskov was walking. What path? There is no path. There is just a little track, little path between the trees. And then Kluchevsky, this wonderful Kluchevsky, who saved me several times, told us, the Russian person, if goes a wide road, then he will not go his path, American civilization, British, whatever, to the eastern, but a paved road will bring him somewhere. But use your little path for one person, it will meander, it will be hidden behind, but it will bring you somewhere. Probably I'll end up with this wonderful saying of Leskov, great Russian historian Kluchevsky: use your little personal, meandering, unclear, but your own path. I believe so. In our daily life, it's not so often that we see people who has been doing, making sense all their life, professionally, creating and brewing culture. And Lev is one of such rare people. And the fact that he came here to share
And indeed, this is one of the most important features of this public discourse. While I've only been granted a word as for concluding remarks, the position of a chair, unfortunately, has not allowed me to ask questions or to participate in the discussion. But one of the questions, if I had asked a question during this session, if I'm prepared to live in any country where the conditions are better than here in terms of reading or writing, for instance, the freedom of speech and freedom of writing, do I cease to be a Russian? And when we say that the Russians seek for the sense of their being, do you believe that it is in any way different with respect to the English or any other nation? Mr. Anninsky, I still have questions which I have not been able to ask, and I do hope that you will come back. And one day I will not be a chairperson, but will be able to conduct a discussion. Well, of course, we won't be able to make these questions clear. Well, an American says, stand up and go forward. An Englishman would say, my house is my castle. That's an age-old English answer. So I think that every people, every nation would answer the question differently. Colleagues, thank you for this discussion, and I am really in a position to be supportive of the cosmopolitans. And unfortunately, I disagree with your harsh critique of the Russian literature. Thank you so very much. Thank you. Before we thank the expert, let me give the floor to Lena for a concluding remark. Well, I'm very glad that this session materialized, because I belong to a generation. Which always followed Mr. Anninsky's intellectuals, and I would even say intellectual and poetic pursuits. I think that he conceives Russia as this Gogol's three-horse carriage that is speeding across the snow-covered plain with the sparks of snow shining in the sun. Lev Anninsky is one of the most prominent literary figures or literary critics of the Soviet times, a person who has preserved his dignity throughout the beastly years of the Soviet rules, who indeed always stood for his dignity and was able to preserve this and to preserve his right for independent thinking. I remember how the contemporary Russian Slavophiles and Westerners have been vying for his opinion and for his support. But he has always been in his own realm, in his own domain, where dignity is the word, where dignity is the banner. And I thank him. I thank him for this life of a friendship, and this is indeed the energy of a person who has lived in this country for over 80 years and has gone through the life of this country in this very uneasy century. He personally has always been so active and always Mercury, vibrant as Mercury. He has always been a camp by himself. He has never belonged to any camps in the Russian literary affairs. Lev Anninsky is a person who has introduced, while I disagree with many of his views, but I certainly agree with him in one most important thing. Through art and through such figures of literature as Lev Anninsky, we preserve something that I agree to call the Russian language, which is as great as the English or the French literary tradition or any other literary tradition. A world of literature which comes to exist through language. And Lev Anninsky has made us a part of this heritage. And it is through language that we perceive the Russian history, but not as destiny, but as Alyosha said from St. Petersburg, we all have the right to master this language and to create this history as we understand it. I think that the past is a symbol, but we have to move on and to create the modernity. And I call this a civil stance that may happily combine the traditional Russianness and the universal freedom, the universal values. Thank you. Thank you very much. Colleagues, bon appétit. We shall break for 55 minutes.
Два организационных момента. Первый, у вас на столах лежат анкеты, заполните их, пожалуйста, и сдайте мне, для нас это очень важно. И второй момент, кто не расписался в регистрационных листах, они лежат в начале зала. Пожалуйста,